For those listening in this morning, we had some music to get this religious group off to a start. For inspiration, we listened to Monty Python and the Holy Grail with a discussion of coconuts and how coconuts may or may not be tropical. Following that, we listened to Miss Fisher's murder mystery closing, marvelous New Orleans jazz that was composed in 2012. Then we listened to the famous Stanley's trumpet tune and voluntary, which is often used to close weddings, especially the kind of buildings I used to have, which were kind of Gothic cathedrals, literally. And then finally, we heard a magnificent, which should be the theme song of this group, Ray Charles, Messing Around. Now, to those of you who are well aware of this, I was not till Grant Santelier and I yesterday were watching Lucifer. We'll not even get into that. Season 1, episode 9. And Lucifer, yes, the Lucifer, and a priest were playing a piano jazz piece, and it sounded really cool. I had never heard of it. So you can find anything on the internet. So I put down jazz piano music, episode 9, season 1 of Lucifer, and bang, all the music for the episode popped up. You can find anything on the internet, and there's probably app for everything as well, including how to cut nose hairs. So having said all of that, welcome. And yes, I did start recording, which reminds me you all are wretched. You must remind yourselves that I am ancient. My abilities to remember things are obtuse, especially since I cannot record things in my class because it gets to be involving privacy. I'm not allowed to record anything in my class in Miami Dade College unless I have a signed consent from everybody in the class that they don't mind their picture being shown or their face or anything else. So I'm not used to recording things. So do remind me, Ron, that's your job. You were off gallivanting last week. Doug was out on the golf course. The rest of you suddenly had laryngitis. So anyway, let's remind me to record things from now on so I can do a better job than trying to scribe everything, send you notes, which had all kinds of editorial comments, which showed a certain bias about the editor. Having moved on then, some things before we begin. You may have seen the census results. I don't know if any of you were surprised at the results of the census, but in the last 3 or 4 years, I've been asking my students as we begin the class, is anybody interested in sharing their DNA? This is not a requirement. It is a ask if anybody would. I have been amazed at the number of students who have had their DNA done. And if they haven't done their DNA, I said, would you be interested, any of you, volunteering, going back to tell me where your grandparents or great-great-great-great-parents came from or anything you know about them? So between the two, we usually have, by the time we're finished, a minimum. My minimum number was 36 countries represented. The usual is 38 to 40. And when we do DNA, this is a classic thing of what happens with my Hispanic students, especially those who come from Cuba. They will get the following: 60% Iberian Peninsula. But then what comes is a big shock. My students think this is a riot. Their parents and grandparents are absolutely apocalyptic and apoplectic when it shows they are also Northern African. If you get a cheap DNA, if you get a real DNA, it says, ready for this, and you should not be surprised, Morocco, Mali, and Senegal. and I have to explain geography to my students who occupied the peninsula for 700 years, tribes from the Atlas Mountains. Now, if you know anything about mountains, you trade on one side, but you also trade on the other. That's the way human beings do it. And what's on the other side of Morocco? Mali. And at the end of Mali is the very famous Timbuktu. And anybody will tell you if you're going to trade inland, you also have to go to the coast. And who's on the coast? Senegal. So you get a trifecta: Morocco, Senegal, and Mali. And so my students think this is right. And then you're going to find a lot of Cuban American students look as if they came from Ireland, especially County Cork and Tipperary. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Roman Catholic Irish rebelled against the English nasty Protestants about every 50 years like clockwork. And when they lost, the nobility were given transport free to Spain and France. Hence, if you ever looked at the famous cognac, Hennessy cognac, it is Irish. These are Irish expatriates. Yes, there were so many Irish expatriates in Spain during the Napoleonic Wars, 20%, two full brigades of the Irish army, two full brigades of the Spanish army were all Irish expats. A bunch of them will ultimately wind up migrating to Cuba. So when you see a Cuban American student and they've got red hair, or they're plastered with white skin, freckles everywhere, and black hair, and they look Irish as they come, my students have done this. They do their day. How did I get 20% Irish? So I have to explain where the African comes from. I have to explain where the Irish comes from. They think this is cool. Their parents and grandparents, I said, are absolutely losing hair over this. They think this has got to be wrong. I said, they obviously don't understand history. They don't understand people migrate or emigrate, and they don't understand people have moments. The grandparents don't understand if you're 700 years in the country, you may from time to time have a relation, or as I call it, a moment with the inhabitants, and the result of these moments will be presence. Who will carry things down the line? Now, this present, we're going to get to our class in a moment. I showed that 13.5 million people now claim that they are mixed in this country of background. I too filled this out when I had a chance now as saying white and Native American, because my background is Native American as well. My grandfather was almost full-blooded Mohawk of the Iroquois. So I put down both because it's true. So white and Asian, a mixture of white and Asian is 18% of that 3.5 million. Black and white is 20.5%, and Native American and white is 26%. Okay, Doug, that's our, who is that? Is that Joseph Bryant? Joseph Bryant? You got to unmute.
It's our great-grandfather.
That's our great-grandfather. Show that picture again.
Isaac.
Is that Isaac? Yeah, that's our great-grandfather.
All right, dudes, if you want to understand some of me, there I am, right there. Except he's a
Less
bit
hair. One of you has less hair.
Thank you for that. You have to love cousins. I told my brother, who's a half brother, I said, you know, I've never gotten to really know my birth father's side of the family till the last few years. And I said, you know, I really have nothing in common, and I mean this lovingly, with you or Emily's family. I said, psychologically, I really fit with my first cousins. I said, we really, really have everything in common. I said, it was a big shock to me that I've always been in the wrong nest. I somehow got misplaced. Emily's side of the family and I do not relate at all, but I relate very, very easily with Pat and Doug and Holly. And of course, Ron, we adopted. The things you do for a family. All right, moving along then. Let's see, coming up for a review. Let me remind everybody to ask me to record from now on so I do not have to give scribal notes which have certain imperfections. How do you like that? Certain imperfections of editorial commentary. Oh, that was good. Certain imperfections of editorial commentary. That's worthy of some kind of advanced degree. Moving along. All right, let's take a look at what we remember about yogas. The argument is that if you take a look at the ancient Indus Valley civilization, there is this very, very old, roughly 5,000 year ago thingy. It's called a Pashupati. I think Daniel got the pronunciation right. And on that is a seated figure. This leads to all kinds of discussion. Were human beings in the Indus Valley, in fact, practicing yoga 5,000 years ago? I'm always interested in academic arguments like this because it really doesn't make any sense. Human beings get fed up with life generally from time to time, and so you want time out. And so I should not be surprised whether technically this begins yoga or not, but I think the reality is we and our Neanderthal cousins have been frightened by fate, frightened by bad luck, frightened by bad natural storms. July was the hottest month on the planet, as long as they've been keeping records of this. This July was the hottest month we've had. Human beings get scared by this, and human beings also tired of bad relationships, or good relationships gone bad, tired of death, of relationships, death of family, friends, bad health, a lot of scary things, and people just get stressed out. I am sure long before anything was recorded, people went out and got away from other people and just sat down. That's what you do. When you're tired and stressed out, you back off, you get away from other human beings or human types, and just say, I need out. It means you may go walk by the riverside and sit down. You walk by the creek. You may go out in the desert and sit. You may go up and stay halfway on a mountain. You may go climbing, or you may doing what the Colombians, we just found in ancient Colombia, 20,000 years ago, art. They just rediscovered a whole nother series of art that dates back 20,000 BCE, that'd be 22,000 years ago, of this beautiful red painting on art. I think that's a way of taking time out too. You want to get away from everybody, you make art. You go in a cave where nobody's going to bother you, and you make art. So I'm not surprised that people want to take time out. And I'm sure, by the way, you've seen Neanderthal art, and we now understand Neanderthals had maybe some of the earliest art recorded now for Homo types, hominid types. They found a new kind of they thought it was some kind of rock sediment. No, it's actual pigment. They just predated it, and it's the oldest type of art we've ever found. It's Neanderthal. So hominid types have needed time out, and I don't think we should be surprised by that. So whether or not it was technically noted the first time 5,000 years ago in a kind of coin kind of thing in the Indus Valley region or whatever, I don't think anybody should be. All of you do this too. Some of you may take time out by golf. Well, if you play golf the way I do, that's not time out. Some of you may go bicycle riding. Bicycle riding is a great way for time out. Some of you may go for walks. Some of you may read. Some of you may actually go and do exercise. Some of you may meditate. But I think a lot of you will find your own ways to take time out. We'll talk about that again with what some of you said last time. So we know that Homo sapiens, hominids, Neanderthals too, took time out. The yoga first appears, the word, in the Upanishads, which were written about 2400 BCE, 2400 to 2500 BCE. The Upanishads, the word means to sit at the feet of, like you're sitting at the feet of a guru. And the idea of the Upanishads was to distill what the Vedas were all about. The Vedas are enormously long written pieces of writing about the creation of the world, mythologies, rituals, liturgies, name something that human beings are involved with. The Vedas were 4 of these, written about 1500 BC, as an attempt to synthesize all of the stuff that had come in from mythologies from people moving in, as well as the mythologies of the people that were already living in the Indus Valley. We had indigenous peoples living in the Indus Valley for millennia. People ultimately from the Yamana culture, where they invented the wheel and tamed the horse, will move north, west, and east. People moving east will move into what we call now Iran. And from there, they will move also into the Indus Valley. All these people will bring with them their ideas. And ultimately, by 1500 BCE, they are synthesized and distilled into the 4 Vedas. 1,000 years later, nobody has read the Vedas. They're too big. They don't make sense. The language is strange. And so a new attempt is made in the Vedas and the Upanishads. And that's the first time the word yoga is used. We have had all kinds of discussions about yogas being seated. You need to know, let me remind everybody, there are a number of ways that yoga then gets synthesized. It used to be seated. There used to be certain ways you seated, certainly in the lotus position, holding your hands a certain way and breathing. That lasted only so long. Then there became a time of yoga, people getting up and stretching. And then yoga was seated and then get up and stretching. Then some gymnastics got thrown in and a kind of hybrid hatha yoga, which is exercise, and yana yoga, seated meditation. Well, then some people just exercise isn't enough or seated isn't enough. So they're going to combine the two. So you heard that last week when you had, oh, come on. Felix said he started out with exercise yoga, but wasn't enough. And then he combined a way of combining exercise with meditative yoga. Others are going to find meditative yoga is not enough. You need to combine that with exercise. So you're going to get all kinds of combinations thereof. By the time we finish, as of 1984, there were over 900 positions and ways of using seated and exercise yogas. That's just seated and exercise. Now, there are other yogas too, which we'll get to in a moment. But let me remind ourselves, between seated and exercise yoga, over 900 different ways to do this. That boggles the mind. Today, yoga is not just for the few. Yoga has developed into a worldwide multi-billion-dollar business involving classes. We mentioned this last week. Certification of teachers, clothing. I mentioned this last week. I would like to explain, going back 5,000 years ago, that you needed certain clothing to do yoga. People wore what they had, which wasn't much. They may have been barefooted or some kind of sandal and a loose kind of fitting gown or garment and maybe some underwear. They didn't wear much. And now you're telling people they have to invest a couple $100 in special yoga outfits. There are books, videos, and holidays. Ancient cross-legged sitting in a lotus pose was nice, but that has long been surpassed in the last 100 years, especially in the last 50 years in Western society. And now it turns out what we've done here has now boomeranged back into India. So what we're doing here is now going into India, where now you're having certified teachers, clothing, and the whole bit. So interestingly enough, what has gone out of India has gone back into India, changed up. It's a strange, interesting world. Two things before we continue today. I want to talk about two other yogas, two kinds of yogas that don't get mentioned often. Some of you may hear the word tantric. Tantric is a word that is highly debated. By the way, you do realize in religion, everything is debated. I think you picked that up. No matter what the word is, no matter what the concept is, there are people who are going to have footnotes and footnotes debating whether the word existed, how it was pronounced, when it was pronounced, different pronunciation variations, etc. Tantrism as a concept supposedly evolved in the 9th and 10th centuries, both out of Buddhism and Hinduism. It involved, now it starts out okay. It involved visualizations. How do you visualize a deity? Using drawings using pictures. Usually males and females were depicted as fierce and frightening, especially females, fierce and frightening. Any of you have ever seen a depiction of Kali, for instance? Have you ever seen a picture of Kali, the Indian Hindu goddess Kali? That'll scare the wits out of you. Aside from a number of arms, she has skulls draped around her, blood all over the place, teeth that look like a shark's teeth, and eyes that look like you're already devoured just as soon as she looks at you. Scary as all get out. So you have deity visualization, fierce male and female deities, transgressive life stage related rituals, extensive use of chakras and mantras, and now here's the one that'll throw you: sexual techniques. Usually when you hear the word tantric, everybody forgets all that I just read to you, and they'll hear sexual techniques. Tantric yoga used to suggest you could be male and female naked next to each other, have arousal, but never complete the arousal. In short, it used to be that a male would have an erection, a female would be showing a signs of stimulation, but it would never be touched or consummated. The ultimate form of sexuality in tantric sex was to be aroused, but to transcend that. Now, as all things, that looks good on paper, perhaps. In reality, people found that there was only so much you could do before nature took its course. I'm trying to be polite here. So as a result, this winds up with, as you could imagine, all kinds of abuse where people are assuming, male or female, that they are going to be into a very natural, very non-sexually acted out ritual. And of course, things happen. And so tantric yoga took on a very, very dark or delightful connotation, depending on who you were talking to and where you were talking to it. Tantric yoga still exists, and in the United States, we have a Buddhist school out, I want to say in Arizona, that had major sexual upheavals, and the head yoga was found to have abused several females, and et cetera, using tantra sex. I'm just trying to share with you some other things. How have other religions looked at yoga? As you could imagine, Sting had fun with journalists once by saying casually that he and his wife, oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay, that explains everything. Let me say that it's interesting how religions have dealt with this. First of all, let's start out with that wonderful state of Alabama. The state of Alabama, which has one of the lowest rates of vaccination in the country, and the legislature is doubling down and wants to be sure that you cannot and will not have any ban on you will not have any way of demanding masks. They want to vote to make that's illegal. This is also a group that was totally against yoga in the classrooms, and several teachers who were also legislators said, yoga has been found to be excellent in calming kids down, especially when they're stressed and anxious. It's especially good for first, second, and third grade of getting people calmed down, taking time out, and kids to get used to it, and they like it. Legislators who knew nothing about Hinduism were absolutely convinced this was a way to convert everybody to Hinduism. After 14 years of arguing it, this year, they finally agreed that yoga can be used in public schools, but it is illegal, with great caveats on this, not caveats, with great fines, etc. If you use the word namaste, it's illegal to use the word namaste or namaste, or mention anything at all to do with Hindu or religion. Now, of course, this is unconstitutional. You're not allowed to prohibit somebody else's religion, but nonetheless, you can see where he goes. Islam forbids the use of yoga, except, you're going to love this, Sufi. Sufi Islam, in many forms, uses yoga, and as Roy pointed out from Bellingham, Washington, When you see whirling Sufi, that is a form of yoga. We talked about that last class. When you're seeing whirling, the English used to call it whirling dervishes. When they have a very form of people whirling and they become connected, where they say with the one in this constant, it's almost like doing a dance mantra. You get into this kind of thing and you go and it becomes almost like a mantra. It almost gets you into a zone, then it gets you into a zone. And you lose all worries about and anxieties about and concerns about. And this is a pathway of connecting with the one. It sounds like a yoga. And that's exactly what Roy said. Yeah, that in a sense it is. Sufi has no problem. Neither does, this shouldn't surprise anybody, non-observant Judaism, Reform Judaism, and Reconstruction Judaism, and now parts of conservative Judaism. Oh yeah, it's like the resistance teaching evolution. Same thing, same kind of thing. In fact, I think when we are against evolution, we're showing, how do I put this? I want to put this kindly. People said, we did not descend to the apes. I think we're insulting the apes, especially when you realize that we are almost 99% chimpanzee. And I keep reminding everybody, if you haven't seen what a full male or female chimpanzee looks like compared next to a human being, you're in for a huge shock. These are our DNA, folks, and they are strong and solid. So when somebody's say, I'm not descended from the apes, you're insulting the apes. All right, let's go then. Okay, so Reform Judaism, non-observant Judaism, Reconstruction Judaism has no problem with yoga. Liberal Christianity has no problem with yoga. Sufi Islam has no problem with yoga. It's interesting to say most people who need time out have no problem with doing various forms of yogas, physical or meditative yoga either. So again, we have a weaponized sense of meditation, a weaponized sense of building your body, your mental capabilities, and your spiritualities is weaponized again. I'm not sure how this happens, but it does. Okay, having said all of that, let's remind ourselves before we look at other forms of yoga, what you all said last week. When I asked you to share ways in which you took time out to meditate, many of you said, one person said, my mind is way too active. Words and prayers are said again and again and again to slow my mind down. This takes a long time to retrain your brain to slow down, to calm down. It takes a long time to train your body to do what it's not used to doing. And so this person found it was worth the journey of taking a long time to retrain the brain and retrain the way you observe things. Next person, which said they exercised in many forms and ways, and they found that mantras and mantras and mantras again and again and again were soothing. Let me point out, there is a Russian Orthodoxy, I forgot this last week, a famous Jesus prayer, it's called, and monks will say this simple prayer over and over and over and over again. It's only 3 or 4 words. And they'll say it over again. And by saying over it again, it's not unlike saying a mantra in Hinduism or Buddhism or Jainism, where you get your mind accustomed to what? Going and going, and then you get into a zone. I call it a zone. I don't know whatever phrase you want to call it, where you block things out and you become almost mesmerized by the way your brain gets into this again and again, and it becomes soothing, if you will. But it takes practice. I don't know about you. I could say a mantra and I'm not used to it. So for me, it would take quite a while for me to get used to saying a mantra before I got bored. I can't sit still to begin with, and therefore my mind doesn't work. But for those who have the patience to offer mantras again and again, they tell you it works wonderfully, absolutely wonderfully. So I go with those who have patience to do that. And I think, by the way, a lot of this has to do with patience too. One of our members talked about doing Tao Te Chi. It has 108 moves. You do 108 moves in 12 minutes, and you can do sets of these, 2 or 3 sets. And by the time you're finished, your body, your mind, your soul is totally refreshed. It's like getting a total cleaning inside and out. You will notice the number of people, by the way, who do Tai Chi in parks, all ages, all ethnic backgrounds, young and old. They'll be minding their own business and just doing their Tai Chi. Nobody's screaming at them what to do. Nobody's turning into a drill sergeant. They do it. And you see calm. Look at their faces. I'm always amazed when you see somebody doing Tai Chi. Look at how seraphic and serene the face is, as opposed, you ever look at somebody when they're running, by the way? You ever looked at joggers? Have you ever seen a jogger smile? Now, it's interesting. When people walk dogs, they smile. When people walk, they smile. I have yet to see a jogger smile. Look at the people doing Tai Chi. They're seraphic. It's annoying. I mean, they're just seraphic. You want to know, like, how did you get that way? And it's free. Do you understand that? It's free. It's not a billable hour, for God's sake. Another person wrote that I do deep down breaths. Breathing can be a big deal in all of this. Person said they took deep down breaths. They were seated on the floor. And the person also said, my body doesn't work in certain ways, so I find ways when I'm seated on a mat that works with my body. I think it's important to remember none of these yogas today are made to hurt you or to go against what your natural body does and feels like. The idea of yoga is to take what you are and who you are physically and work with what you've got than trying to make you fit in a box. If you can't sit in a lotus position or you can't lie on a mat in a certain way, you find a way that works for you. Now, maybe a long time ago, they tried to make you do it differently, but today, yoga teachers, instructors try to get you to find a way that makes your body work naturally so you can then go, these are not using yoga phrases, go with the flow of the way your body feels with the surroundings and the way you can breathe and work with your yogas. Again, somebody said they're way too busy. They use physical exercise, but then they discovered meditative exercise and they found a way to make a hybrid of the two. Then finally, we had one of our members said they don't trust themselves. I get that. I agree with that 100%. I would not trust myself to do this by myself at all. So this person said they go to a class because with a class, they've got no choice. Because if you're stand out, you look like a knot in a log and everybody else is doing their exercise and you're standing there. I mean, obviously you get forced into doing what you do. Once upon a time, this will shock everybody, I used to do aerobics. I don't know if does anybody have aerobics classes anymore? Do they exist? When I was in Chicago, I did aerobics classes. And then something happened years later called Zumba. And I hear everybody doing Zumba, and that is aerobics too. But the aerobics classes I was in were where you were on the ground and you did certain kind of exercises, poodle kicks and all kinds of other things, lift legs and all kinds of stuff. And then there was one when you had to do some back stretching. Richard Simmons, does he still do aerobics? Anyway, so the idea was aerobics. So Zumba. Now, have any of you ever seen Zumba classes? They use music and the people there are very happy. Did you ever look? Now they have Zumba classes made for people that are beginners, medium, and advanced. One of the things that I find fascinating is when you look at Zumba instructors, I've yet to see a Zumba instructor that didn't enjoy what they were doing. And you look at people in classes and they're happy to be there. Unfortunately, you have to pay. So let's take a look then. We talked about two kinds of yoga. One was knowledge and study. Jnana yoga. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. Jnana yoga. My pronunciation is always wrong. Knowledge and study. Originally, this meant knowledge and study of the Vedas, and then knowledge and study of the Upanishads, and then knowledge and study of gurus who are trying to instruct you, written and poetic, being able to memorize the Bhagavad Gita, especially the important lectures between Krishna and Arjuna, and being able to know certain sections of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, the two biggest famous pieces of literature in Hindu writing. But then Jnana Yoga in the 21st century and late 20th century also meant to include, Roy, we were just talking about you. We were going over what people did last week with Sufi. And I was also pointing out that a lot of religious groups have problems with yoga, but Sufi Islam does not. Various schools of Sufi do not. Sunni and Shia do, but Sufi does not. Liberal Christianity doesn't. Reform, Reconstruction, and non-observant Judaism don't. But it was interesting. Certain aspects of traditional Judaism, traditional Christianity, and traditional Islam say absolutely not. They're threatened. I have no idea why. But Sufi and the rest of them do fine. It's another way of yoking and getting out of yourself. So we're talking now about knowledge now also means not just knowledge of sacred texts, because sacred can mean so much. So we also now to remind ourselves there are those among us who soak up all kinds of knowledge, and I said are not just religious, quote unquote, religious knowledge, not just knowledge about certain texts or poetic rituals, etc., but also knowledge of things in general, because I'm absolutely convinced that we could lose the cloud, something could happen, a mistake could be made, and you're going to need people with that knowledge to keep us back on track. I think you and I are well enough, or smart enough to know that things can go wrong. All you need is some kind of horrific glitch and out goes the cloud. I mean, I'm not joking. I'm not trying to be horrific. I just know if something can go wrong, human beings will find a way to do it. And I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just saying nothing would surprise me. So knowledge, not just of sacred rituals and literature and texts, but those people who are, if you will, are walking reference librarians. And there's some people like that. Every class I teach, I have one person like that. I would say that we have a couple here in this class. Maureen is one of them. Maureen is having a bad hair day, I'm guessing. I don't see her hair. Oh, that's too bad. I was hoping for a repeat. I really was hoping for a repeat. I think Roy's like that too. Roy,
I know.
huh?
I know Pat wanted to see the poodles because she misses them.
Pat, by the way, let me digress for a moment. Pat has been a very, very bad girl. She has been extraordinarily bad. She has left us as we are about to have not one, but two storms. We're about to get drenched in two monsoons, and she decides to leave us and go back to New York, forest shrubs, so she and Daniel can enjoy the bike paths without rain and everything else. So for those of you who like to wish bad things on people, like, you know, I don't know what, Pat has been very bad. I'm very sorry about that. It's very upsetting. All right, moving along. We need people who know things. Second kind of yoga we talked about was meditation, and then hatha yoga are exercises. And so what we need, we saw in yoga then, as human beings do, it's for some it's meditation with seated, for some it's exercises, but a whole mob of people have said that's not enough. We do need to do a hybrid. So we've got knowledge yoga, meditation, exercises, meditation and exercises, but there are two other forms of yoga which I want to mention as well. One is called karma yoga. And a lot of you do this and probably don't realize that in Hindu thought, it's also considered a way of connecting with the divine. I think a lot of you do things for others all the time and don't realize you're doing things for others, and you're not doing it with any thought of just trying to be helpful. Now, I know for a fact, and he's going to be embarrassed by that, though John is a retired dentist, I know he helped people out who had insurance issues and things like that. I'm thinking of Patty, you remember Patty, who's now deceased, and others who you helped.
Patty's deceased.
Yeah.
Oh,
Others you helped. I bet you if I were to go around and I got to know, know every one of you here, I'm not going to put Roy on the spot, but I will. I know the kind of work he does. I know you've helped other people out because of that kind of work you do. I know Serge has. Serge, by the way, he's going to be embarrassed by this, got a big shout out from the entire T-Mobile Corporation for the work he does for others. On the beach, for those who he took a whole bunch of food over to the people who were first responders at the towers. He's done a lot of work on his own. He stays extra afterwards. When they merged to another company with T-Mobile, Sprint, Sprint got customers got this. Yeah, it was a mess. Serge is on a special team, but he goes above and beyond to help people, especially after hours when they're just stuck. He does that all the time. John does. I think all of you, if I were to get to know you, have found ways to help others. I know Mary goes out of her way to work with people in her family. I know all of you do. That is considered a way of helping others, is considered karma. Doing action for others in which you do not expect payment. It's not a billable hour. It's not because you want a reward. It's not because you're looking for it. You just do it. You just do it. And I think that, since our other cousin isn't here, I think a perfect example of this, I'll put Doug on the spot. We had a new cousin we were not aware of. And Doug spent a lot of hours making sure that we knew that we had another cousin, and spent a lot of time making sure that we were welcoming, which of course, Pat Busmus and I jumped right in. And so he took time. This was somebody he did not know. There's a whole family saga behind this. He did not need to continue to know. He opened up his heart. Pat and I jumped in, and that takes time. Takes a lot of time and takes expanding the circle. And so I think all of you do that. And by the way, taking care of animals counts as well, not just human beings. A lot of you have had rescue dogs, rescue cats. Am I right? Am I right? Rescue dogs, rescue cats. That is a blessing in and of itself. We have in Miami-Dade County a huge number of animals that are just dropped out into the Redland. People just drop out, go down to a homestead out in the Redland, open a car door and toss dogs and cats out. Melissa was telling me there are 325 dogs ready for adoption in the Miami-Dade County, the brand new Miami-Dade County shelter. 325 dogs. Okay, Maureen Sullivan says she found new cousins. Maureen has both of her dogs are rescues. I mean, many of you have done that. Believe it or not, the wire-haired dachshund that we had, her name was Xena. Her owner got her as a puppy, as a swap for show. And when Xena's front teeth didn't come in, she kept this poor dog in a cage, never groomed or anything for one whole year. Then she put her up for adoption. And when Maria and I found the state of this dog, we called the original breeder and reported this. This poor dog didn't know, was just mortified. Her hair was ruined. Her skin was almost ruined. It took her 6 months to adjust to being around another wire-haired dachshund and humans. This marvelous rescue, who had bad front teeth, buck teeth, and cross teeth, lived to be almost 17. When we got the wizard, she immediately became his mother at the age of 13. Sadie Maria, who I wanted to, her breeder wanted to make her finish her championship, and then put her out for breeding. Sadie Maria never knew her mother because her mother was on the show circuit. She was born a puppy, then her mother left her after she was 10 weeks old. So Sadie joins us, and guess who mothered her too? Xena, that little rescue we had, turns out to be a fabulous mother to the wizard, a fabulous mother to Sadie, and just was we rescued her. So those of you who rescue animals, you know, through no fault, things happen to them. So you've rescued family members, you've rescued people at work, you've helped others. I know I'm not going to put Ray Roldan on the spot, but I know where he works and he helps people all the time. So I'm sure all of you find ways to rescue animals, take care of those. And let me also remind you, when animals get older, that involves a certain kind of dedication as well. Animals get old, and like us, they have certain issues. And so rather than, you know, you stay with them to the end. And so that takes all kinds of effort and love. So then karma yoga is how we do things for others. And however you want to do that, that's another type of yoga. And finally, the fifth most popular is Bhakti Devotional. Now, devotional yoga can take many, many forms in Hinduism. It can be something as simple as having a figurine of, and I will talk about gods and goddesses next time, because this may not be what you think it is. They may have a picture of Ganesha. That's the god with the elephant head. And I'll explain all of this beginning to next class. Then you'll see a figurine of maybe Durga or not Kali. Kali's scary. But you may find, well, maybe somebody would have one of Kali, especially if you're a woman and you've been abused. And you may want to have a figurine of Kali there. But you may have a figurine, and then you may have a flower that you put next to a fresh cut flower. Or you may light some incense to begin the day. Don't laugh at aromatherapy. Aromatherapy has been known to work through millennia. You add some aroma and it changes the way you think. Now, you know that. Aromatherapy, it does something olfactory wise. It does something to the brain. It can be extraordinarily calming and uplifting. So to add some incense. Wait a minute, is that 19-year-old cat? Is that the 19-year-old cat? 19 years old. Wow. He looks fine. He doesn't look 19 at all. Looks better than I do. All right. So you get aroma, you get incense. It does, it's an devotion, fresh flowers, reading some poetry. Now, in terms of us, since we're not Hindu, each of you may do a devotion and not even realize it. How many of you read something enlightening every day? I bet you'd be surprised, or at least a couple of times a week. You may read something where you see something on the internet and you read it because you find it enlightening. You find it connects you out of yourself. I know this sounds very secular, but I consider a religious experience something that's transformative and good and gets you out of me, myself, and I, and lifts you beyond, something out there that gets you connected to something that's good and healthy and can be transformative, even if it's just for a few minutes. And so you may read something and it transforms you. Devotion does not mean you have to be on your knees at a prayer desk doing a rosary. That is a form of devotion, but there are other forms of devotion as well. Reading. I just redid my funeral service and I did some reading again. And in my funeral service, I have a reading from Rumi, Sorrow Prepares You for Joy. I have a reading in my funeral service from Rumi again. This is a guest house. You are a guest house. I have a reading from Micah. What does the Lord require but to do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God? And I have a reading from Jesus about why you consider the lilies of the field. You know, and I have some readings from the Sermon on the Mount. So I find that reviewing things from time to time connects me with other literature that I had forgotten. And there's so much out there to get us beyond ourselves. All of those are devotions. Let me also say, for those of you who walk or get outside and take a moment to look around you for a change, and you don't, and you know, a car, where's Karen Paul? Karen Paul has been sending these pictures of flowers from her garden. Now, to show you how annoying this is, about how limited I can be, I thought these are very, very pretty. And we put them up in the weekly. But then I started looking at them and I thought, this is kind of nice to look at. And in the middle of the week, I'd be pulling up one of these pictures and looking at the flowers and thinking, I wish we had some of these around here as well. And it's amazing how you look at flowers, you look at trees, and you look at around you. And I started taking a look around where we live, and now the hedges are blooming. And we got some other things that are blooming. And I'm thinking how great it is to take a look at nature itself. And that's a devotion that's given to us again for free, right there around us. So the 5 biggies in terms of how do you yoke with the divine, however you wish to divine the divine: knowledge, doing things for others, all kinds of ways of meditating. The most popular, of course, is seated in a lotus position, but not everybody can do that for a variety of reasons, but seated meditation. And a lot of times, what's the famous thing with Zen? Sit down, shut up, pay attention. Sit down means you sit, you shut up for a moment, and you pay attention to everything you don't pay attention to, like, life around you, everything that lives, that is cool, that is wonderful, that you never see. One of the nice things, by the way, where I live, the traffic is so bad that you can't move, and you suddenly realize there are palm trees all around you. I never noticed the palm trees before because I was going so fast up and down the street. Now that I can't move, I get to see all these palm trees all over the place and say, gee, I didn't realize they were there. That's embarrassing. So you get knowledge, action for others, seated meditation, exercise in any number of forms of exercise. Franzella has a 1.5-year-old technological genius on her hands. Franzella's daughter, who's 10 going on 11, is already one of these. She reads everything and writes everything. Her brother, on the other hand, is a terror with technology already at a year and a half. Perhaps even—
This is true.
Huh?
This is true.
Yes, he's into everything. He's wild. And so taking care of a child is a form of yoga. And Danny said, why isn't participating in this class where you're expanding your mind a form of yoga? You take time out. You're seated. Yeah, I never thought about that. That's right. We're seated, aren't we? We're paying attention to new things, and we're taking time out. Good shot, Daniel. Good shot, Daniel. And Franzella having to take your, you got to think about that. Talk about a yoga. Imagine a 1.5-year-old kid, boy, who is faster than lightning and is already pecking and looking at laptops and looking at these things with a look. The look like, I get this, or I'm going to get it. Plus, then you've got a 10-year-old, 11-year-old ready to go into Oxford already into a literature class. I mean, imagine trying to do this and maintain a profession as well as a marriage. That's a lot of yoga. So I'm just saying, as you look at all of this, we need to expand our idea of how we do exercise, how we grasp new things, and like this class, sit down, shut up, and pay attention. So, welcome to Cecilia. So next class, we're going to introduce Hindu gods and goddesses, and there is a huge split about what this is all about. And I'm going to send you, and I sent it to you today. It's called, where is this thing? Where is it? Modern Hinduism and Modern Thought. I want you to read this because this is, as of the 19th century, turned Hinduism as you and I thought we knew it upside down. And it has radically changed Hinduism, though let me point out, there are obviously there are very traditional forms of Hinduism that think this is horrible. But where Hinduism has evolved or re-evolved or gone back to comes about in the 19th century and has now helped transform, don't you love this, modern Hindu thinking. Again, it starts in India, goes west, it now goes back into India. So we're going to look at traditional forms of gods and goddesses, understanding that this has all been radically challenged and rearranged. And so this is where we're going to go the next class or two. So let me say hello to everybody who's here this morning. We've got John from Port Orange.
Morning.
Maureen is out near the Redland. Pat, who is exiled herself, left us here as we're facing two monsoons. Melissa is down near the golf course, which I'm sure is going to get deluged too. Mary Grimmy, you're looking for a deluge out in Tampa. Yes, the storm is going right near Tampa. Barbara Young is down in South Miami. Ron is on his estate outside of London. When he said London, I looked at where you live. That's not London. You are outside of London. That's all I'm going to say. Yes. Look at that smile. Tells you everything you need to know. By the way, you know, you never told us what you do for a living.
I
You don't have to.
I'm happy to tell you. I'm an IT auditor and specialize in IT risk analysis.
I knew it. All right. Pat used to work in finance. Melissa was let's go around here real quick. You might find this interesting, and you can help me out. John was a dentist forever. In fact, his work was so good, the fillings he gave me, he told me, he said, you don't have to change your fillings, but the new fillings coming in, he said, should last you a lifetime. I still have the same fillings he gave me back in 1988. Same fillings. And the dentist said they're as good as gold. Okay, Pat used to be in finance. Melissa was a nurse and then a midwife for 18, 20 years. And the nurse
21 years delivering
How much?
babies, 21 delivering babies and 44 as a nurse.
All right. Pat, what were you, tell us about what you did or do.
I had an employment agency in Washington, DC, personnel placement.
Okay. Doug works for, excuse me, BMW. Yes.
If that's not enough, I used to work on Rolls Royce.
Whoa.
You know, there's no limit to this. That just doesn't stop. Doesn't stop. Barbara Young, you know, I know about your husband, may his soul rest in peace, but I don't know. Were you a teacher? What did you do?
Was an art reference librarian and art
Yes, I forgot. Yes, I remember now.
curator.
Yes. Yes. And Mary Grimmy.
I was a stay-at-home mom who raised two incredible kids and dabbled in other jobs on the side.
Yeah, that's not also what you did. You also supported a very dysfunctional family, trying to keep them sane. And I'll be honest about that. And you also helped your husband as he navigated a whole bunch of one career, then navigated into the career he's doing now. So you've been a tremendous support. That's a big deal.
Yeah, he was in corporate retail, and we would sometimes get a 2-week notice before we had to move across the state. So yeah, I did all that but I never actually was able to go back to work because his job would bounce us everywhere and I couldn't prepare.
Mary, you're showing your age. That is work. You
Yeah.
never got out of work.
I never got paid for it though. I'm still waiting for the check.
Good way to put it. Okay. Roy is an attorney. Roy, is it okay to tell him what kind of attorney you are?
Sure.
Roy is one of those attorneys who works with divorce without war. Is that a good way to put it?
Sure. Yeah, I do what's called collaborative divorce. We try to divorce with love, you might say.
Yeah. Which, if any of you, I hope you can appreciate that. you've seen movies. What was that movie that that famous one on divorce where Kathleen Turner and what was
War
the
of the
name of that?
Roses.
Huh?
War of the
War of the
Roses.
Roses. That was a laugh, except it happens all the time. So Roy is actually applying his Sufi values in his work. Ray Roldan is working in New York with others. He mans a desk and referrals for others. And I won't put him on the spot, but he does a lot of work with people who need a lot of help. Maureen Sullivan is a cop.
No, I'm a customs officer.
Same thing. I'll pay for that. I will pay for that. I will pay for that. Danny, what do you do? Can you share with us what you've done in your life?
Okay, a rather checkered career. Major jobs. Well, I worked in the federal government in contract administration for a good number of years. I worked for the New York State government in insurance underwriting for a few years. And the last 15, 20 years or so, I've been doing mainly tax preparation work for H&R Block. I now consider myself pretty much retired. Until the pandemic, I was doing volunteer work also at the Museum of Natural History in New York. Varied.
You do see the tapestry here unfolding. Everybody's into everything. Serge Cruz, I gave the big shout out for. He's an assistant manager at T-Mobile, but he got a huge shout out for the amount of work he does for others outside of T-Mobile and in T-Mobile as well, making some incredible bridges. Now, I'm assuming that's Tony Lee when it says TMO iPhone. Tony Lee is retired. She lives in Miami Lakes and has been a long time member of the UU Miami, Unitarian Universal Association of Miami, and she's also part of what we do here. Franzella is fairly new to us. She refers to herself as a recovering evangelical, and is really, she's sharp. She's an architect, and her husband's into IT, and the result of the IT and the architect is this 10-year-old ready to go into Oxford in literature, and the 1.5-year-old who's already eyeing laptops and keyboards and trying to figure out how it works. And Cecilia Lisandro, who lives down the street, is into hospital administration. And she had to go to work at the worst of the pandemic last year. And this year, they were not allowed to stay at home. They had to go to work. So she is, and she's also, by the way, the mother of two very, very different boys. Very different boys that have grown up, and they are different as night and day. And and she has her mother living with her from the DR. So she's got her mother on one hand, who still thinks things ought to be done they were back in the DR many, many millennia ago. Cecilia is very modern, and she's got two sons who are as different as night and day, and somehow she smiles. It drives me nuts. She smiles and has a great sense of humor. How she does this, I have no idea. Absolutely not. So this is some of what we do. And you get an idea of the vast things that everybody brings to the table. So when you share things, ask questions, and you throw your input in, listen to the background and see how this enriches us. Okay, for those of you who can, tomorrow we're going to be talking about 6, and I hope some of you can make this. When people ask, is there anything you believe? The answer is yes. We have 6 incredible principles that need to be shouted out. Sources from which we try to derive the way we process the world ourselves and ourselves in the world and things around us. And what we do in this class is an extension, every bit of those 6 sources. If you look at the 6 sources that I will send out in a few minutes, you'll see this class is a living extension of those sources. It's what we do. We're acting them out. And this is what kind of grounds us. Not everybody feels comfortable learning things about other religions, other expressions, because my heavens, you may find something that helps you. I mean, good heavens, what happens if you listen to something in another faith community and it actually works? What happens if you get introduced to something you've never heard of before and you're wondering, where have you been? I've been doing that for the last 2 years in this class. And then you get people like where is he? You get, where did he go? Where'd he go? You get Ray Roldan, who sends me a thing of music called Jars of Clay, which you're all going to hear. Roy sends me, I get all this stuff from people and I'm wondering, did I ever have an education? So if you're like me, you're going to find this class is not only learning, but it's like a continual education class on top of everything we do. So there you go. So I wish you good health, keep safe and well. You know, the pandemic, by the way, you need to know that I did get a thing from the transplant team, and they told me to get myself immediately to a vaccine center for a booster. There are no vaccine centers available. I called and they said they have to have a permission from corporate or permission from anything else before they can do that. So I got permission from the transplant team, but I have to wait till all the available centers get permission to do that. But I am sure that they will come to it in some way, shape, or form. In the meantime, I shop at 7 a.m., wear a mask, wear gloves when I go out, and yeah. Oh, wow. Yes, look at that. Whoa. You need to send that to my cousins. We all need to be wearing those. What was that movie that Michael Remy starred in 1950? That black and white movie when the guy lands in a flying
The
saucer?
day the earth stood still.
Yes, yes, we all want to wear those. We have to reenact the day the earth stood still. We've gone back to the 50s. All right, be safe and well. Some of you I see tomorrow. The rest I see next Saturday. Next time we're going to be dealing with Hindu gods and goddesses. All right, everybody, be safe and well. I'll finish putting this out. Click the record button that we stopped, put it together and send it all out to you. Bye-bye now, everybody. Bye-bye.